Your Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can check me out on X at Jack Bushman too, but make sure to check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Quick reminder as well to go in and smash that like button, jump in the comment section down below, and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. It's all 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really does help me out tremendously. All right, happy Monday, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's bundling up through the frigid temperatures that we're getting here in the Chicagoland area. That's going to, unfortunately, remain until Thursday. On the bright side, though, does look like temperatures are going to get back up into the 40s by Saturday or Sunday, and hopefully through next week as well. Really keeping my fingers crossed that this is going to be the last freeze, if you will, of the winter time before we kind of transition into spring. But I should know better, being a lifelong Chicagoan. We're definitely going to get snow in like the first week of April or something like that. Quick little tidying up to do before I jump into segment one, where I'll be talking about the Tankathon Standings that the Blackhawks find themselves fully in the midst of once again. Segment two, I'll break down an epic battle between the United States and Canada on Saturday night, the rematch that is going down on Thursday in Boston, and some other updates from the Four Nations face-off before concluding with Mailbag Monday during segment three. And a good time to remind you all, jump in the comment section down below with your Blackhawks related question. I know I've been a little bit lackluster in terms of the comment section over the last 10 days. I've just really been using this time off during the Four Nations face-off to get some much needed R&R, kind of some self-care. I promise I've been reading all of the comments. I went through all of them today, made sure to not leave anyone out on today's episode, today's edition, I should say, of Mailbag Monday. I'll be responding to everyone's comments. I promise. I greatly appreciate you all reaching out. Just kind of had to take some time to myself. Don't get that very often in the midst of a grueling, 7-month, 82-game NHL campaign. I promise I'm seeing all the comments. I'm getting to them. And again, go and hit me with your Blackhawks related question. I'll bookmark it and answer it this time on the show next week. But to kick things off on the episode today, Blackhawks fans, as I mentioned, the Tankathon Standings. It's that time of the year once again, and I really didn't believe the Blackhawks were going to be firmly in the mix, in the big three, if you will, as I'll get into here in just a moment, in terms of having the number one overall pick in the 2025 NHL draft. I mean, I expected them to be, somewhat in the conversation, maybe the 6th or 7th best odds, but I didn't expect them to be in the bottom three of the NHL standings once again, as we're well into the second half of the campaign. However, even though it's been a lot of hair-pulling nights, a lot of frustrating losses, once again, it is another prime opportunity for the Blackhawks to add a high-level prospect to a very deep prospect pool already. Quick plug, broke down Scott Wheeler's top NHL prospect pool rankings recently on the show. Make sure to go and check out that episode if you haven't done so already to see where the Blackhawks come in at. But it is another good opportunity to land another high-end prospect to this prospect pool, and probably a big name forward next to Connor Bedard. But speaking of the 2025 NHL draft as well, do want to mention that throughout this upcoming week, I'm going to be starting to get into little updates on the Big Four. I'll probably talk about Anton Frundell, if you will. The Big Five, I guess I could say, in terms of the 2025 NHL draft prospects, and we'll be taking a look at how each of those players' seasons have gone up to this point. It's not going to be my full NHL draft profile deep dives on guys like I do during the summer, but since we are into the Tankathon Standings part of the season once again, sure looks like the Blackhawks are going to be in that conversation for number one, and if not, probably another high draft pick in this year's draft. So I figure I might as well take a look at all of those guys and give you all a little bit of an update into my feelings on them and how their seasons have been going. But getting into the Tankathon Standings now, coming in at number one, aka with the best odds to land the number one overall selection. And dead last in the NHL standings is the San Jose Sharks, who have been tanking just as well as the Blackhawks have these last few seasons. The Sharks are 15, 35, and 7 through 57 games, only have 37 points on the year with a 3.325, points percentage. And you got to remember that's what this is ranked by, points percentage. 0.325 for San Jose. They're 1-8-1 in their last 10 prior to the Four Nations break, currently giving them a 25.5% chance at the number one overall pick. Then at number two is our Chicago Blackhawks, 17, 31, and 7 through their first 55 games this year with 44 points, 4 more than San Jose in 2 fewer games, though. They have a 0.373 points percentage on a decent run before the Four Nations break, right? I think they had points in 7 of their last 11 or 8 of their last 12. 3, 3, and 4 overall in their last 10. Currently would give them a 13.5% chance should they finish the season in this position. At number 3, a real shocker. I don't think anyone saw this coming. The Nashville Predators got off to a horrible start, and they have not been able to find the solutions. They're now 19, 28, and 7 through 54 games, only have 45 points on the season. Incredible. 0.417 points percentage, 4-6-0 in their last 10, giving them a 11.5% chance at the number one overall pick. Then at number 4 is the Buffalo Sabres. They're 22, 27, and 5 through 54 games with 49 points, 4 points ahead of the Nashville Predators. 0.454 point percentage for the Sabres, 5-5-0 over their last 10. The number 4 spot has a 9.5% chance at landing the number one overall pick. And then there's the Seattle Kraken, currently 5th worst team in the NHL, 24, 29, and 4 through 57 games with 52 points, 3 more than the Buffalo Sabres, 7 more than the Nashville Predators, and 11 more than the Chicago Blackhawks, with a 0.456 points percentage, 4-5-1 in their last 10 before the Four Nations break. The 5 spot has an 8.5% chance of the number one overall pick. Then Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Montreal are tied for 6th with 55 points. But as I mentioned a moment ago, it sure looks like there's a big 3 or a big 4 contending for the best odds to land the first overall pick in the 2025 NHL draft. Those teams are the San Jose Sharks, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Nashville Predators. Each of those teams have 45 points or fewer. San Jose has 37. The Hawks have 41. Nashville has 45. And I do think you still got to throw the Buffalo Sabres in that conversation, even though they do have 49 points. That's 12 more than the San Jose Sharks, because there is still a sizable amount of games left in the year. Most of these teams have somewhere between 27 to 28, 29 games left on the year, maybe even a little bit more than that. So there's still some, shuffling that is going to be happening down the stretch of the season. But one thing I think we all need to keep in perspective with this as well is that we haven't reached the NHL trade deadline yet. And a lot of these teams you would think are going to be sellers. But quite honestly, when I look at it, and now I don't do, the Locked On Sharks show like JD Young or Locked On Predators or, Locked On Kraken. So I'm not into the nitty gritty, like I am with the Blackhawks, but for a couple of those teams in the Big Four, I don't really know how much selling they're ultimately going to be doing at the deadline. For the Sharks, Jan Ruda is currently on an expiring contract, but he's injured right now, and his play I don't really think has been all that great for San Jose, and he's not at the cheapest price tag. So not sure how attractive Jan Ruda is going to be, even though he is a big right-handed defenseman with Stanley Cup experience. Nico Sturm is another guy who's on an expiring deal, but he's also hurt at this point in time. Then the other two who are on expiring contracts, maybe the Sharks would be willing to move someone who's not. Again, I'm not 100% positive on that, but at least going through TSN's trade bait list, like there's not a lot of San Jose Sharks, on that list. Luke Kunin, Klim Kostin, but those are low-level type of guys that won't generate high-level returns. So I don't know how many moves the San Jose Sharks are going to be doing before the deadline, and I don't know how many moves the Nashville Predators are going to be doing either, because this roster was kind of built to win, and obviously that hasn't gone to snuff thus far, but I don't really know who they can be looking to get rid of. It's not going to be someone like Marchessault or Brady Shea or Steven Stamkos, who they just brought on at expensive price tags. Gustav Nyquist is the real obvious one for them on an expiring contract. He's high up on TSN's trade bait list. Andreas Englund is a depth defenseman, Blackhawks legend. Andreas Englund, excuse me for that, is a guy, a fringe NHLer, 6th, 7th defenseman on an expiring deal, but not a very attractive trade piece. There's some Ryan O'Reilly type of rumors, but I don't know how serious that type of stuff is considering he's their leader. So for San Jose and Nashville, again, I could be wrong on this, but I don't really know how many at least notable moves are going to be doing at the deadline. For the Chicago Blackhawks, I don't know if that's going to be the case because Ryan Donato was obviously a very attractive trade chip. And I just broke down last week as well the pros and cons of trading or keeping Ryan Donato. Went through all of that. Go and check out that show if you happen to miss it. But of course, Pat Maroon, we've also talked about rumors on the show recently about him. I've said Craig Smith is kind of in that same conversation. There's been some rumors around Seth Jones. Connor Murphy, I think, is unlikely, but he's still number 29, I believe, on TSN's trade bait list. There's lots of rumors involving the Chicago Blackhawks, more so than the San Jose Sharks and the Nashville Predators for sure. A big reason why I threw the Buffalo Sabres in there is because they're kind of a disaster right now, and there are a lot of big names rumored to be on the market for them. I've talked about Dylan Cousins time and time again on the show. There's complications with that for his contract that he signed on for, $7.1 million, but still lots of rumors about him. Lots of rumors about, maybe someone like Owen Power or Bowen Byram on the back end, should they want to move a defenseman. Like, there could be notable pieces being moved from the Sabres that in, the future could cause them to lose more games down the stretch. Something to keep in mind for both the Blackhawks and the Sabres. The Blackhawks, already a terrible team. They're certainly not going to be better without Ryan Donato. So there's definitely room for teams like Chicago and Buffalo. There's room for all of these teams, sure, to get worse, but I think that's more so the case for the Blackhawks and the Sabres. So for Chicago, who's right now just 4 points ahead of the San Jose Sharks, I think they're firmly still in the mix to land the 25.5% chance at getting the number 1 overall selection by finishing dead last in the NHL standings. So that's kind of how the Tankathon standings are shaping up at this point in time, and my thoughts on the matter. It's that time of the year again, Blackhawks fans, to be watching how things are going for the San Jose Sharks, checking those box scores on the Nashville Predators and the Buffalo Sabres. Didn't think we'd be here once again, but here we are. Coming up in just a moment, I'll turn the page and talk about an epic battle between the United States and Canada that fortunately we'll be seeing a rematch of on Thursday night in Boston. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is only just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay right in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And as my followers on X, I'm sure of aware of by now, that's what I like to do for my hockey bets. I usually like to take a goal score and the over-under historically on the data in the past matchups between whoever the Blackhawks are facing in that point in night. But there's loads of different options for whatever you like on any single sport. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com in order to join today, or go and download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Again, that's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Go and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Segment 2, the Four Nations Face-Off, ladies and gentlemen, has been an epic success. Saturday night, the United States versus Canada. I really don't even know where to start this conversation because there were so many epic moments, and all in all, my main takeaway from it that I just wanted to get to right here first and foremost is that it was awesome to see the game of hockey shine the way that it did. And the numbers behind this game between Canada and the United States, simply incredible. 4.4 million viewers on average, peaked at 5.2 million viewers, up 473% from the ESPN's World Cup of Hockey back in 2016 when the United States played Canada, up 369% in terms of viewership versus NHL on ABC's average this season. And it was the most viewed non-Stanley Cup final hockey broadcast since 2019. And I was watching with one of my good buddies, and I had so many different texts coming from so many different people, family members, friends who I haven't talked to in multiple years, college buddies, just knowing that I'm a big hockey guy. And to see people who really, I know, don't watch hockey regularly to be texting me about this matchup and even the hype that was going into it. Like, I was over at one of my cousins on Saturday morning watching some golf and watching some sports with him. And my aunt and uncle, who they're into sports. They watch, it was casual fans, but they were super jazzed up about the matchup between the USA and Canada. So for it to go as successfully as it did on the ice to live up to its expectations and then some with the type of game that it was, the intensity, the atmosphere, the fights right off the draw that just gets everyone locked in right from the get-go. As an American, gotta say, huge shout out to the Tkachuks for really setting the stage and just fully shining in this atmosphere. And I kind of had a feeling they would. And I talked about in my previews of this tournament, the United States, the grit and the tenacity and the fight that they play with. They have that edge more so than Canada. Canada undoubtedly has the skill on paper, but the United States, they got that grit and they got that sandpaper. And that was fully on display in this matchup. 3 fights in the opening 7 seconds. Brady Tkachuk taking on Sam Bennett. Brandon Hagel fighting Matthew Tkachuk, JT Miller battling Colton Parayko. Got to give a lot of respect to Brandon Hagel for stepping up and fighting someone like Matty Tkachuk, who he, gives up some size to. And he even said, I think it was after the game, not backing down from a guy like that. Huge hat tip to Brandon Hagel. To set the stage like that right off the gate was awesome. And that first period, it was absolute war. And man, I had goosebumps watching it. I'm sure there were a lot of Blackhawks fans out there feeling the same way that I did. But considering how long this team has been in this downward spiral and how long it's been since we've seen them play big time hockey, I had forgotten the emotions that come with watching a big time hockey game. Yeah, you get a little bit of a taste of it when watching the Stanley Cup playoffs year in and year out. But when it's not truly your team and someone you're backing with all your might, it doesn't feel quite the same. And to get those vibes and those emotions once again throughout the game, ahead of the game on Saturday, it was excellent. And for the United States to get the win on top of it, especially after getting that anthem booed, which I'm not going to go into the details or my feelings on that all too much. I didn't like it, but I do understand Canada's perspective on it. I'll leave it at that. But for the United States to go in that building in a tough atmosphere where everyone was rooting against them and to pick up a 3-1 win makes my prediction of the United States taking this bad boy down look pretty good. I said the changing of the tides, the changing of the guard. There's a new bad boy in hockey, and it's the red, white, and blue, baby. We've been seeing it at the World Juniors these last couple of years. I said America was going to win. Maybe there was a little bias behind it. And listen, they haven't won anything yet, but I sure liked the performance that they came with on Saturday. Didn't go without, Connor McDavid making his presence felt. And when that arena erupted, the Canadian anthem was excellent, by the way, but when that arena erupted from that Connor McDavid goal, it was oh my goodness. McDavid kicking things off in a fashion that only Connor McDavid could do, blowing past everyone, backhand top shelf cheese. Another moment where I got 40 texts of oh my God, this dude is ridiculous. I was telling my little cousin, who's 17 and not a big hockey fan. Unfortunately, he didn't get to grow up through the heyday of the Chicago Blackhawks like I did in my teenage years. He's not really all that familiar with Connor McDavid, and I was telling him he's a bad, bad man. And for him to watch Connor McDavid score that goal and text me right away, I was like, I'm glad you got to see the special talent that this guy is. But after that goal from Connor McDavid and the fans were into it, and oh my gosh, the physicality in that first period was unlike any hockey game I can remember. Even this for a Stanley Cup playoff game, I felt like that was super high level intensity. And the Brady Tkachuk hit, on Drew Doughty into the board. Drew Doughty was literally sideways, halfway up the glass. I mean, Brady absolutely ran him through a wall. I've probably watched that hit 47 different times at this point in time, but that's what I'm talking about. That sandpaper, that physicality, that grit that the United States and the Tkachuk brothers absolutely bleed, all on display. And so was the team defense, which, as I talked about in my preview and my prediction, why I thought the United States was going to win. Yes, undoubtedly Canada's forward group, that's the most talented group in this tournament. But the United States has the better decor, even though they were without Quinn Hughes, did help as well. Canada was without Cale Makar, unfortunately, in this game as well. But the United States decor was phenomenal in this game. In particular, Noah Hannafin, I thought, was absolutely excellent. Charlie McAvoy, I was pumped up watching Charlie McAvoy play out there. Never shied away from contact, was throwing hits as a big boy right-handed defenseman. He knows his role out there, baby. It's to play like a jackass. And he was not shying away from contact. Every opportunity he got to throw the boom, he did. And he also played very well stand-up defense and handled his own in front of the net. I thought that Jacob Slavin, I was almost going to call him Blackhawks legend Josiah Slavin. Jacob Slavin was really solid as well. Those guys all night long, whenever Connor McDavid or Nathan MacKinnon entered the offensive zone with a ton of speed, they made them spin and turn around and not get those real primetime opportunities from in the danger areas right out on the dot or make a guy miss. They made them pull up and go to other options. The team defense was phenomenal all night long. I thought Matt Boldy was excellent, man. Matt Boldy is such a special young player. Seth Topol from Locked On Wild, man. You guys got a good one up there. Matt Boldy has been excellent in this tournament. I thought Jack Eichel played pretty well. Connor Hellebuck, really solid in net too. The X factor for the Americans, but he really wasn't like leaned on all that much down the stretch. It just didn't feel like Canada really had that much intensity, even though it was a 1-goal game. Jake Gensel was the one to tie it up. Dylan Larkin put the Americans ahead for good on a 2-on-1 with a nice shot. And then Gensel with the empty netter, he winds up being named player of the game. But oh boy, like I said, even though the United States came away with this one, they haven't won anything yet, as we are going to be getting a rematch between the United States and Canada on Thursday night in Boston. Wonder if the Canadian anthem is going to get booed. Boston, not exactly known for being the nicest of sports fans, and Canada kind of set the stage there at the Bell Center in Montreal. But it almost didn't happen, let me tell you, Blackhawks fans, because despite Canada racing out of the gates, jumping ahead to a 4-0 lead, Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid doing their thing, unfortunately. A lot of Blackhawks legends being brought up on the show. Blackhawks legend Kevin Lankinen got pulled. UC Saros had to come in for him, and current Blackhawk, the only Blackhawk to be taking part in this tournament, Teuvo Teravainen, was a healthy scratch for Finland in this game. But shout out to the Finns for never giving up, never having that never say die type of attitude. That's what makes them so great and made this game meaningful for them. They picked up the overtime victory over Sweden in their last game, and of course fell to the Americans in their first one, but they were giving it their all right until the very end and made this bad boy interesting. 3 goals in the final 7.5 minutes from the Finns, cut Canada's deficit to 4-3, 2 in under a minute to really make Canada start sweating it there. Sidney Crosby came up in the clutch to get the empty netter. Canada is moving on to face the United States in the championship of the Four Nations face-off. And Blackhawks fans, go and drop your prediction right below in the comment section. Do you think the United States is going to come away with this tournament like I do, or do you think Canada is going to strike for their revenge in Boston? I will say, probably not the best vibes for Canada going into that rematch, considering they almost duffed a 4-goal lead. I know that's now in the past, but I'm sticking with the Americans, baby. I think things are rolling for them. Connor Hellebuck in net is the X factor, like I said, going into the tournament. Red, white, and blue coming away with it in Boston. They're going to be throwing Johnny Gaudreau's jersey all over the place, and I cannot wait for it. But there is everything to know ahead of a great matchup to conclude the Four Nations face-off on Thursday, what has just been so monumental, I truly feel like, for the game of hockey. The NBA All-Star Game got absolutely dunked on by the Four Nations tournament. There's no all-star games that truly feel like they matter anymore in the game of sports. And I know the Four Nations Face-Off isn't an all-star game, and I'm sure there are some owners and GMs out there who didn't necessarily like the physicality of the opening 20, 30 minutes in that game between Canada and the United States. But at the end of the day, those feelings have to be brushed aside for the betterment of the game. And there's no denying what happened this past weekend between the United States and Canada. What's going to happen on what I'm sure is going to be another epic matchup on Thursday. It's going to be for the better of the game long term. I think we're all going to be super stoked for best on best moving forward more often in the game of hockey. I'll actually be talking more about that on tomorrow's episode. But coming up in just a minute before I conclude today's show, still got to get into my weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. Hope everyone's staying warm in these frigid conditions. Just a reminder for your second listen, go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast, as after the United States and Canada duke it out on Thursday, we're back to normal NHL action. Down the stretch of the season, you can get daily tips to become a fantasy hockey expert with Steal and Flip. You can easily go and find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, Mailbag Monday, before I close things out. First one I've done in a couple of weeks here, so got a handful of questions. And again, a reminder, you can easily reach out in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're tuning in through an audio platform, you can also throw your question in the review section, preferably with a 5-star rating. Those are always great. Or can DM me on any one of my social media channels or email lockdownblackhawks@gmail.com. First question that I wanted to get to, and again, I really believe I got to everyone's comments, and I will be responding to everyone here over the next couple of days. First one I got to, though, is William Sacconi, 616. William, hope I didn't butcher your last name, buddy, who asked, "Yo, Jack." Yo, William. Love the videos. Got a question for the mailbag. Over under 2.5 of the following players to get traded by the deadline: Ryan Donato, Jason Dickinson, Pat Maroon, Alec Martinez, Connor Murphy, Seth Jones. 7 players there. Definitely curious on what you're hearing on the Hawks trade rumors. I think that's a really savvy line set there, William, I got to say, because I think it's either going to be 2 or 3 players dealt by the Blackhawks. Spoiler alert, as I broke down last week, I don't necessarily know if it's the right move to trade Ryan Donato, but I do ultimately think the Blackhawks are going to move him. So I think he's getting moved. I don't believe Jason Dickinson is getting traded. $4.5 million. Still a little hefty at this point in time, and he's someone the Blackhawks really enjoy having around. Good veteran leader, plays the right way, one of the best defensive centers in the game. Still has another year on his deal at $4.5 million as well. Pat Maroon, I certainly think he's going to get traded by the Blackhawks. 100%. He's going to go to a contender. Donato and Maroon are the 2 most likely Blackhawks to get dealt. As far as Alec Martinez, I thought he was going to be involved in rumors, considering he's on an expiring deal and his age. You would think all he really cares about is winning, but he didn't even really make it seem like when he was talking to the media that he wanted to be traded, like he was kind of bought into the Blackhawks. I thought that was kind of weird for a guy at the stage of his career, and maybe that's just hockey talk. Maybe we do wind up seeing Alec Martinez get traded, but I haven't seen him on any trade bait lists. From what I've heard, I haven't heard the Blackhawks wanting to trade him immediately, and I think they have been really happy with what he's done with Seth Jones when those two have been healthy with one another on the top pairing this year. So I don't think Alec Martinez is going to get traded. I mentioned a moment ago in segment 1, Connor Murphy was a guy on TSN's trade bait list, but he's at number 29, still has another year on his deal. I think it could happen, but I don't think it's very likely. Seth Jones, yes, there have been rumors, and he's actually even in the top 10 of TSN's trade bait list, but there's a lot of complications that go into trading Seth Jones, and I just don't see it happening right now at this point in time. Now, with the salary cap going up these next few years, Seth Jones' contract is 100% more tradable. But right here, right now, I think there's too many factors going into it. So I don't really expect Seth Jones to get traded whatsoever. The only ones I do are Ryan Donato and Pat Maroon. Maybe there's a chance one of those last 3 defensemen that I just went through, Martinez, Murphy, or Jones, do get dealt. If you're going to ask me, though, if I got to decide, I'm going under 2.5, William. I think only 2 players from the Blackhawks that you listed right there are going to get traded. Next question comes from CTAV21 on YouTube, who asked, not particularly a question about the Blackhawks, but me and some friends are coming to Chicago from Saskatchewan, Canada. Love that. In April to watch my Hawks play the Jets on home ice. That's awesome. Super excited to watch them play in the UC. Anyways, with us being in Chicago for 4 days and our first time in the city, we are wondering, other than the game, what are some places/sites we should check out while we are there? That is an excellent question, and the type of question that I always willingly love to answer here on the show. It doesn't always have to be about Blackhawk stuff. It could be about anything in general. I mean, let's keep it somewhat relative here, but glad to help. Glad to help. Lots of different things you can do in 4 days' time in April. Now, it does depend on what weather you're going to get. As I said off the top, there's always that chance that you're going to get that April snow. But if baseball's going on, like I think Wrigleyville would be awesome. If there's a day game going on, go out to a bar in Wrigleyville. It's an awesome atmosphere. Get a good bite to eat. But there's so many good things to do in Chicago. The Field Museum's awesome. Art Museum. I'm a big Shed Aquarium type of guy. Navy Pier, again, kind of weather permitting, along with the Riverwalk is something cool to really do. The Chicago Theater you can always go and check out. People love the Bean. That's kind of weather permitting once again. And honestly, like the Bean is super overrated, but if that's up your alley, that's always something cool to check out. I just love Wrigleyville. I grew up, a big Chicago Cubs fan, spent a lot of time in my day down in Wrigleyville. Safe part of Chicago, great atmosphere, ballparks right there, TVs, good food, all you could want right down in Wrigleyville. Food, though, as far as food goes, got to get an Al's beef at some point in time. Got to get Al's beef. Portillo's is around. That's a common staple that people will tell you to get. This is probably going to make me sound very suburban here. I'm a big Lou Malnati's deep dish guy, but I'm also a true Chicago tavern style type of pizza guy as well. I really, love both styles of pizza, but it's kind of whatever you fancy. Lou Malnati's, Pequod's, 2 real good deep dish type of spots. Loads of places to get good tavern style pizza. But yeah, those are kind of the places that immediately came to mind, and hope that helps with your trip to Chicago to watch the Blackhawks play the Jets 4 days. Hope they get a big W for you at the UC. Next question comes from Darren Wilcox, 4683, who asked, how about Donato and our second-round pick to the Leafs for Fraser Minton? If you're going to trade Donato, I'd rather get a prospect rather than a pick. Yeah, that's a good point to bring up, and I just think it makes things a little bit more complex. Like, especially to go and get a prospect the level of Fraser Minton, who the Leafs think highly of, second-round pick, a center iceman. Yeah, it would definitely take Donato. I don't know if Donato in a second, considering he's on an expiring contract, would be enough to get them to pry away Fraser Minton. But also, that's a team that's desperately trying to win a Stanley Cup and put an end to that drought. It does seem like the market this year is going to be more so a lot of buyers and not all that many sellers because of the way things are shaped up. So maybe they get desperate enough to make that type of move. I certainly would be interested in the Blackhawks going that route and taking on a prospect. I just don't know how many contending teams with true high-level prospects that would make a difference in the Blackhawks prospect pool, whereas Kyle Davidson could get a draft pick and take a guy that he personally has high upside on in the future, or gets a pick of the litter, I guess I should say. I think that's probably the more likely route. That's why we see trades more so result like that. But this definitely isn't a trade that I'd hate. I just don't know if Donato and, well, it would be an early second, technically like a late first. I don't know if there happens to be a Maple Leafs fan watching this. I doubt they say yes to that just because they're stubborn, but maybe that would be enough. We'll see. But I don't hate that mindset, whatever. And I agree. I'd like to see the Blackhawks get a prospect, someone who like maybe is a little bit more proven that could help out the system. But, it's just kind of hard to get someone who's willing to trade those type of guys. Next, we have E. Johnson 121385 on YouTube, who asked, if the Blackhawks are going to be good in a few years, shouldn't we expect the Ice Hogs to excel a year or two beforehand? Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The Ice Hogs actually have been excelling the last 3 years up until this season, as Anders Sorensen had to go up to the NHL. They don't even have a real head coach in there coaching the Ice Hogs, and I really do think that's a side effect that not too many people are considering and something that I've talked about multiple times on the show. They really did have a good thing going down in Rockford. Not that they had, a lot of choices to replace Luke Richardson, but something you definitely had to consider in the firing of Luke Richardson is how Rockford was going to be affected. And it's kind of been a lot of revolving doors. A lot of guys, like Drew Comesso has really struggled. The defense, the lineup doesn't even really look the same as it has these last few years. This has been a step back type of year from the Ice Hogs, but yes, hopefully with the amount of talent that's going to be coming onto the pro scene next year and the years after, likely developing down in Rockford before fully being NHLers with the Blackhawks. Yes, I do think that is going to be the case for the Ice Hogs. And just because it's been a down year for them this year, we should not ignore them getting to the playoffs in 3 consecutive years. Hasn't been long playoff runs, but still making it to the Calder Cup playoffs nonetheless, which is what you want to see when you have a lot of young players at the AHL level who you're hoping are going to be puzzle pieces on the big stage. Last question that I got on today's show, and again, a reminder, if you're tuning in still at this point in today's episode, make sure to drop your comment below in the comment section or reach out on one of my social media channels or email me at lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com to hit me with your question. Last one, Everett K on X. Who is your Frank Nazar player comparison? And this one really stumped me. I'm not a huge player comparison guy unless there's one that really stands out to me. And I'll probably catch some flack for this one, even though I don't think he's exactly the same type of player as this guy. But I see some similarities. I think the world of Frank Nazar. I don't think he's going to be the type of player that this guy is, but I see a lot of Braden Point in Frank Nazar. The size, the way that they make an impact on both sides of the puck, their speed that they can play with, the playmaking and shooting ability. I think Braden Point is undoubtedly the better goal scorer. And again, like a 100-point ceiling type of guy. I don't know if Frank Nazar is ever going to get to that level, but just the way that Braden Point impacts the game for the Tampa Bay Lightning, power play, he can play on the penalty kill. You trust him in all situations. He's a winner. I feel like a lot of those translate over to Frank Nazar. So I feel like he's a lesser offensive ceiling player of Braden Point. If there's someone that jumps out to you, Blackhawks fans, go and jump in the comment section down below in terms of your Frank Nazar player comparison. Interested to hear what other people have to say. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, stay warm, stay safe. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.